Welcome to the Tamarind Learning Podcast, where host Dr. Kirby Rosblock speaks with experts on topics relevant to the ultra-high net worth family wealth management space. Please note, the views and information shared are for educational purposes only and should not be considered financial, legal, or investment advice. Kirby is author of several books including The Complete Family Office Handbook and shares her expertise consulting with families and family offices. Kirby is also the founder of Tamarind Learning, an online wealth education platform that develops practical foundational learning programs for beneficiaries to help them prepare for responsible stewardship of wealth.
Welcome to the Tamarind Learning Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirby Rosblock, and I'm joined by a very special guest today, Jolene Godfrey, who is the sage, the wisest woman I know when it comes to all things financial parenting, raising affluent children, and dealing with complexity in family systems. So I am thrilled to have Jolene here. She has been in this space for a long time. I won't tell you how many years, but it's maybe decades now. And I've had the blessing of working with her in many different stages of my career, which is why I'm so thrilled to have her on the podcast today, because she's a legend. You know, clinical social worker by background, came into the space and saw the opportunity for things to change, and has wisdom that's grown over the ages, which is what I love about how she is relevant and so on it with families. So, Jolene, welcome.
Thanks, Kirby. You know, I love being here. And honestly, there is something so important about the fact that we've both grown through so many stages from a time when financial education was so dry, really. And you and I have watched so many, the evolution and the changes. So I'm as excited to be here as you can imagine. So thank you.
Well, I gave a little teaser about your background, but tell us sort of, how did you get inspired and motivated to come into this niche space that we're in?
This was such an accident in some ways. I had been doing, well, in fairness, I'd been the in-house shrink at what was once upon a time the Polaroid Corporation. So I was working in very large systems and really looking at the psychological life of employees. And I got invited by Inc. magazine, of all things, to go out and interview women entrepreneurs. And I talked to women in, all over the country. And at the time, I didn't really know what I was doing. So I would just plunk a recorder in the middle of the table and have a conversation. When I came out of those interviews, I had transcripts that were really extraordinary. And what I was curious about at that moment was how the lives of those adult women would have been different had anybody talked to them when they were little girls about money. And of course, nobody talked to girls about money back in the day. It's much better now, but still not great, to be fair. Anyway, those transcripts turned into my first book, which was called Our Wildest Dreams. And for a while, I was really focused on financial education for girls and women. And, not surprisingly, I got discovered by other families. And at that point, really was beginning to make up that developmental approach to financial education. And like Lana Turner in the drugstore, it was like, oh, there was a market out there for what I was doing. And I think it was very early days you and I met because you were in one of the only companies that was tackling this.
Well, I know we relied heavily on you in early 2000s. And I remember reading your financial literacy book, like Raising Financially Fit Kids, when there was really nothing else on the shelf, and thinking, wow, this is pretty cool. And I love this idea of having capacity and having this approach to connecting with even like young people, little people, all the way up into the teens, tweens, and then young adulthood. And so talk to us a little bit more about this developmental approach and why it's important to think about it maybe even before you have kids.
Before, that's a great great point. We take for granted that there is a developmental way of acquiring language, of learning to walk, um, even developing our moral compass and moral code. That is developmental, and most families kind of understand that. For some reason, as the developmental psychologists were working, we just skipped right over money, as though you must acquire that understanding through osmosis. And in fairness, I think there was a time when the financial landscape was fundamentally simpler, less complicated. And you probably did learn a lot because your parents or your grandparents were telling you to save for a rainy day, or, you know, uh, hold on to your goods, or whatever it was that the truisms in that family happened to be. But as from really the 1980s on, as money turned into finance, it got more and more complicated.
Yeah.
And so just hoping that you were going to pick it up from your mom or your grandparents was not realistic. And yet, what we were seeing is that by the time we could talk kids into coming to some program or some class, they were busy, or they had other interests, or they didn't see the value of talking about money. And their parents, who were already uneasy about, well, what are we going to do about trust funds? How are we going to talk to them about trust funds? They didn't really want to talk about it either. So there was this for a long period, this what I think of as a no man's land. We're just not going to address this. And then we did, and often it would be advisors doing their best with teenagers who were resistant, or who were really into it but didn't quite know what to do with the information they had. So anyway, I have been frustrated for all those decades you refer to with the fact that families would come to us and their kids were pretty baked. They already had habits in place, and they already had values in place that were complicating how families taught financial ideas and practices to their kids. So it happened that finally I got a family that was coming to the end of a dynasty trust.
Mm.
And they began to understand that they better do something because change was going to be significant now.
Yeah.
And how are they going to prepare these multiple generations for an unprecedented future in terms of family practices? At which point I felt free to say, well, I'm happy to help, but you really need to start with that 0 to 10 group and take a long view, in addition to doing programming for the tweens, teens, and adults that are also part of this family system. And though we had that developmental stage for quite a long time, we didn't have anybody who was really paying attention to it. And so it's really been over the last 4 or 5 years that we've had people who are on the ground working with those stages that we laid out, you're right, about 25 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so parents don't get any sort of instruction card when they come out of the womb saying, oh, by the way, there's this whole like financial literacy thing that you should really know about. Talk to us about how you help the families themselves, how you help the parents themselves, and what does that look like?
That's been the last 3 years of my life. It's true. There is no manual, and the decks that the big financial companies put out, even the great business schools who do the best they can, they are not useful really in a practical way. So what we've been doing is putting a ridiculous amount of time and money into the development of what I think of as products that are somewhere between Lego and Apple. That is serious analog, gorgeous design, but have some access honestly, this is one of the reasons you and I are talking, to the work you're doing. And we're doing more digital work, but certainly not at the level you're up to. And it is this convergence of analog and digital that makes the difference. But it is also bringing in serious design so it looks gorgeous, it feels great to touch, and it's fun. I
Yeah.
mean, nobody wants to be dragged down by boring tools that you have to use with your kids.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and I think analog is the way to go, as you've aptly discerned, because the younger groups, I mean, how many parents are like, oh my gosh, I don't want my kid to have an iPad or anything
exactly.
screen like until they're at least, well, they get it in school a little bit, but they don't want to be giving phones
Right.
and empowering them in that way. So I also feel like that creates a connection point with
Yeah.
mom and dad and maybe caregivers or whoever to reinforce like tactile, because we know everyone has different learning styles. So talk
Right.
to us, like, give us an example of what you might do with, I don't know, an 8-year-old.
Oh, well, it sounds ridiculous, but we have, for example, the storybook of Raffi's superpowers. Superpowers are a great way to introduce intellectual capital to kids. And one of the things we try to do is really expand the idea of what wealth is in kids, because one of the problems affluent families have is that kids are trying to sort out identity and they want to be more than their family's name. They want to be more than money. But if we just focus on the fact that they're rich kids,
Mm,
we just don't get anywhere, or we get highly entitled kids, which of course is not what any family wants. So the importance of having these analog tools is really twofold. One is it does expand the idea of what it means to be wealthy or to be affluent, because we're talking about intellectual, social, and human capital as well as financial capital. Um, but the other thing that it does is that it gives a direct connection between parent and child. We keep saying in our work at Bounce that you can outsource financial education, you cannot outsource financial parenting. And if you do try to overlook it or forget it, what you are missing is the ability to pass on your values, to pass on any kind of legacy, to really instill kids in the expectations that you have for your family. You know, no matter how good the advisor is, no matter how good the tutor is, they're just not going to be able to be in your voice in the same
mm.
way.
I
So,
love that. I love that. That's so accurate. And I also feel like there's so much power when a parent really realizes the opportunity to build this relationship and instill those critical values that have to do with financial well-being, have to do with like understanding means and what's a need or what's a want. Tell us a story of a parent that you saw just hit it out of the park, just
um,
excel, just take this to the next
there are
level.
two stories that just blow me away. One happened in a kitchen. I happened to just be sitting there. 8-year-old comes into the kitchen and says to his mother, who's standing there, I want, I don't even remember what he wanted, but I want X. And the mom looked at him and said, well, no, that's not a great idea. I'm not going to buy that. And without missing a beat, this kid said, well, why not? We can afford it. To which she said, without missing a beat, well, just because we can doesn't mean we should. And I tell that story to every family I meet because I think there are a lot of families who don't know what to say when the kid says, well, what's your problem? We can't afford it. Um, but the paradox of wealth that you and I see all the time is that you can give your kid anything under the sun. And the more you do, the more disabling that can be. And
Mm.
so you need to figure out what your boundaries are with those kids. And watching her do that, as it happened, it was like months later, I'm in the same kitchen with the same family. The same kid walks in, he says something else he wants. And she looks at him and he says, yeah, 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 I know. Just because we can doesn't mean we should. He got it. There is no class that is going to be as effective as that mother. And that's the financial parenting that I think hits it out of the park.
That's such a good story. And I think that's such a good, helpful hint to any parents who are like, oh, I feel like I'm constantly getting hit up for like
Right.
this and then that. And I know, I mean, I have two daughters and, we're constantly like, well, recycle that or well, save that for a rainy day. Like we're not throwing that out. Like that could be used for XYZ. Or like now my youngest is very entrepreneurial saying, oh, I really want to, and my oldest too, sell a lot of like old clothes that they know are valuable, right? Lululemon or whatever.
Right.
And I'm like, great. Like if that's a side hustle, like I'm all for them thinking out about how to be creative. And I think that it also takes parents to be engaged to also say, yeah, be creative, think about what you can do with your own means, your own skills, your own abilities, whether it's babysitting, walking dogs, or even just, doing anything, bake sales or whatever. So I love that. Talk to me a little bit about what you see some of the current challenges that families are facing when we're getting to these conversations when they're saying, Jolene, we need your help, but this is the situation we're in.
Well, there are a couple, and one of the big ones, of course, is time deficits. And I don't know if the world literally is spinning faster or what is different, but we are all suffering time deficits now. Um, Particularly families of wealth are able to fill their time with a gazillion things. And then there's another variable that entered actually quite a long time ago, but keeps speeding up, and that is club sports. And
Mm,
I am a serious, I mean, I love baseball. Let me be very clear. And I'm a sports junkie myself. But what we've seen is that the extent to which club sports have intervened in regular dinners, in weekend time, have meant that parents are competing for their children's time in a way that is relatively new. And and not only are they competing for their children's time, but they are also competing for voice, so that the voice of the parent is so diminished today. They are competing because influences are out there, peers are out there. What kids are reading and hearing on social media is impacting them. So the truth is that parents really have a harder time getting their kids' attention. So when they come to us and say, we need to do something, and I say yes, and you're going to need to connect to that kid directly, they are befuddled, and it's not
mm,
their fault. It's not bad parenting. It is that the nature of our culture right now is honestly anti-parent, if I can put it any
mm.
other way.
I think that's really powerful, right? Because we're so used to like the old adage of the helicopter parent or like the tiger
Right.
mom and all this stuff. And I agree with you. I see it with a lot of families that I'm working with as well, where there's a sense of agency that I think technology has actually created with a lot of the younger folks. And I agree with you about sports, having a daughter in club soccer. Um, so I get it. Like I see how much is vying for their time. And again, they're also, in different stages of their lives, especially when they get beyond grade school into middle school and high school and beyond, they're really trying to figure out connections with their
Right.
peers. And so parents are kind of last on the list of
Exactly.
priority.
Exactly. Well, and the other thing, I mean, you and your company are a huge asset to families. My, I feel like my job is getting those kids ready to take advantage of what you're doing. The more we do to get kids ready to really engage with Tamarind, for example,
Mm,
the more they're going to get out of it.
yeah.
And I think back to developmental, the spectrum, getting kids started so they can really get the most out of the experiences they can have with Tamarind is my work.
Yeah.
And parents are actually going to get their money's worth out of the work you do at a higher level when kids are better prepared.
Yeah, and I don't think we actually dissuade folks younger. 16 is like maybe where they might start, but then they're probably doing it with a parent. But where I love like the balance of building a lot of financial skills, building financial curiosity, right?
Yeah.
I think that's also part of that younger developmental spectrum,
Yeah.
so that when they're starting to think about like my first job, my first apartment, or can I afford buying a home? Is that even like something we should do? And I think that you've actually started to inculcate the values, the thinking, the critical thinking, right? And I think that is really in the firing squad right now, that we aren't building kids to have critical thinking, the skills to in the capacity to like know that this isn't a good idea. I shouldn't be doing this. Or like, I don't know if just because I can, should I? No, doesn't.
No, it's very scary. I mean, you look at betting is another arena right now that I'm incredibly worried about. I mean, that article that came out in the Atlantic about this terrific guy who'd never bet, Mormon for life. I mean, strong moral compass, and he ends up addicted to betting. What an eye opener. And I read that and I thought, oh Lord, I have kids who have the means and access to credit cards who I know are betting at the age of 12, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah.
Not good. And so, yes, figuring out how we help parents intervene and really help these kids make critical decisions and have better judgment, I think is part of our job. But again, competing for their brain space and time is
Yeah.
a huge challenge right now.
Yeah. And I also see growing up in affluence, there's a confusion of what is mine versus like, what am I born into? And like, isn't really mine because it's in trust and there's a trustee and I don't really have access to it. I only get a distribution if I get a So I think there's also this sense of like not being clear about what is really my means. And
Right.
I see a lot of parents who rescue, like they financially rescue their kids all the time because they're getting themselves into trouble, like either betting or credit card debt.
Or clothes yeah.
Yeah. And I would love your thoughts or advice on like, if a parent is dealing with that kind of situation, what have you suggested?
Well, over the last few months, honestly, this is something I want to rant about with you for a moment.
Okay,
I
go.
know you're seeing this too.
Yes.
So you and I both have families who come and they talk to us about often the young women in the family or girls who are compulsive spenders. They're just spending, spending, spending. And they want to know, they ask me if there's a therapist I can refer them to. And I am embarrassed to tell you that over time, I have in fact made some of those referrals. But increasingly, I think what you just spoke about is far more important to pay attention to. That is, kids who grow up in affluence are growing up in a lifestyle in which, particularly with girls, they are either rescued or just given money, and it seems completely normal. And so they do have the $5,000 purse or the $10,000 purse and the designer clothes. And it's because, of course, they can.
Yeah.
But that is a lifestyle that probably on their own, even if they have a healthy trust fund, family isn't really excited about because those young people don't know how to create wealth. They only know how to spend it.
Yeah.
And so somebody eventually will come to me and say, so I've got this kid this 19-year-old or this 29, or even worse, this 49-year-old daughter who's a compulsive spender. When I push, though, increasingly for me, it is, this isn't pathology. This is culture. This is growing up in a system that just gave out money easily without the teaching, without the instruction, the formation that goes with it. And so what happens is that girl or that young person gets labeled as a compulsive spender. There's something wrong with them and they need to be fixed, as opposed to, maybe we should rethink things in this family culture, in this system. So I don't know that I'm popular in families, because now I'm saying, well, before we get the therapist in here, can we talk about the practices in the family?
Yeah.
That's really what you were just talking about.
Yeah. I think sometimes we actually then go to the next rescuer, which is the therapist, who's like, let's talk about how you feel about spending too much. And then you feel guilty, right? Oh, it's terrible. It's so terrible. And then where do you go from there? Well, then I go and spend some more, so at the end of the day, that intervention with the therapist doesn't necessarily change the behavior, which is, okay, we have to look at what are your financial means? I mean, we do have a wonderful activity for those that are more in the adult space that looks at needs and wants and really gets clear on is the $5,000 Ferragamo purse a need, or is it's a nice to have, but it's and you may want it, but you don't really need it. You could get away with a nice Kate Spade or a nice Gucci purse that maybe doesn't have the same, price tag. But I really think that there is a sense of keeping up with, and that's not sustainable either. And I love it when families get to this place where they do a capital sufficiency analysis, looking at what they really have, what they can really spend, and how long it will last. And they have these come to Jesus, moments, right, and say, okay, you can live like this for 3, 5, 10 years. But just so you know, at that 10-year or 3-year or 5-year mark, stuff is going to change. Yeah.
Yeah, no. And of course, you and I have been around long enough to see that actually happen.
Yeah.
It's very sobering. So what we're trying to do, I mean, I think you've seen, we've got this, for example, we've got this event coming up. It's called, What Does It Cost to Feed a Giraffe? And there are 4 tracks, starting with the little ones who are 5 years old. And the idea is, rather than putting it in the family where it gets very personal very quickly, we are projecting into the life of a giraffe. And what does it cost to sustain a giraffe or a lion or a whale or whatever, depending on the zoo we're working with, and helping kids to understand sustainability and cash flow. I mean, those are 2 ideas that are, have nothing to do with your level of affluence. It's just everybody needs to understand sustainability and cash flow.
Yeah.
Easy to get if you're playing with a giraffe as a little kid. And then it's not such a shock when at 15, a parent says, well, the $5,000 purse you could have, but here are the other ways that $5,000 could be allocated and used. What do you want to do?
Yeah.
That's the engagement that I think is really kind of juicy in a family and fun.
Yeah.
But we haven't helped families do that until now.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, it's complex, right? Sometimes this young person doesn't really know what they have access to or what's coming to them or if they will have it. And, parents, sometimes it's just easier to say yes. And then you're like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. And then, or divorced families, that's another, the modern complex family of blended families. So I think there's a lot of complexity. And I love with how you start young and early, giving them a head start to build some of those formative values, to understand behaviors, understand how it's going to impact their lives, so that as they get older, and complexity is only going to happen more, right? They start to have a better framework, a better foundation. I mean, isn't that what every parent wants their kid to have?
Exactly. And I think the messages parents get, and I think even that grandparents get, what's the role of a grandparent now? is such that there is confusion on the part of grown-ups for whom the world is so different. And, I've had grandparents say to me, my grandkid is on the phone all the time, just looking at it. Can I interrupt them? Will they be mad at me? And it's like, oh, come on. This is your grandkid. Just talk to them.
Yeah.
But it has gotten harder. And in some ways, the roles that you and I play are really as coaches to say, yes, it's okay. Just do it. Go ahead. Interrupt them. You're the
Yeah.
grown up here.
And set some boundaries. Like, whatever happened to, like, we have a rule, like, no phones at the table. Like, when we're eating, I'm like, I don't want to see that screen. If you have that up, it's like a no-no. But
Right.
I mean, you do really need to help them, because if you don't set the boundaries and shape the relational conversations, guess what? They're not going to do it with their peers. They're not going to do it with their spouse. And it's rude, right? It's
It's
just
rude.
rude.
It's
Like,
just
and,
rude.
and so I know I spent way too much money when we lived in Palm Beach sending our kids to etiquette school, but like, there's a whole phone etiquette thing that is like, boy, schools are
Yes.
fighting it every day, right?
Oh my God.
So I know it's such a big part of like this youth's lives. What's one thing that you're super excited about? What do you see happening, changing, or an
Oh my God.
opportunity?
Um, so Major League executive 18 months ago said to me, "Oh, Jolene, we wouldn't be interested in what you're up to because you're focused on younger kids. And we know that we can't make any money on these kids until they're about 25 and older." 18 months later, I am being invited to speak to all the CEOs in that executives, and I'm not going to give away much more identifying
Yeah.
information, but it's like suddenly starting early is beginning to make sense because families are coming to this executive and saying, listen, we can't wait this long. We've got to start earlier. So I think change has been tough. I mean,
Yeah.
this has not been an easy sale, to be honest, but it is happening rapidly as people see early is better.
Early is better. And boy, I think the hill is not so hard to climb, right?
Much easier.
So
Yes.
much easier. Like, when you start with someone who's like 40 and has a whole bunch of history of like bad behavior, no sort of foundation, no values around money,
Yeah.
the hill is like Everest. It's
Right.
it's it's hard for anyone even with oxygen, right?
Exactly.
Um, but if you start like with that long-term perspective, all of a sudden, and I think there's parents that do it implicitly, like they don't even know that they have such. I know in my family, it was very, very clear. Like we had a very clear relationship with money very early on, and earning it was always going to be your
Yeah,
friend.
I do. Yes.
So like asking for it, not so much. But if
Right.
you earned it, like good for you.
Right.
And I do think that like if you're a parent that hasn't made it explicit and you don't know how to do it, like they should definitely be calling you because
Yeah.
it's never too late, but it's certainly, it's like trying to lose a bunch of weight when you're like 60. It's a lot harder.
It's
Just
harder.
a
It's
lot
harder.
harder.
Yes. And there is one other little, you remind me, I was giving a talk and this one mother said, look, I did it right. I know I did. I told my kid wanted, I forget, some gaming system. And she said, I didn't want him to have the gaming system, but I said, well, if you earn the money for it, of course you can buy it. And she said, so the kid went out and he earned the money and he bought the gaming system. She said, and now I'm in this place where I don't want him to spend so much time on this gaming system. And yet I set him up. Now what do I do? And your comment about boundaries, I think is so critical because I had to say to her, you are still the grown up.
Yeah.
It's this kid may have gotten entrepreneurial. We reward that, but we don't let them go nuts just because they bought it themselves.
Yeah. I mean, just because you have it doesn't mean you need to like use it and do it all the time.
Right.
I mean, and I think this is self-control. I mean, this goes hand
Right.
in hand with like so many folks in these younger generations have a really hard time. Like put
Right.
down the phone and do your homework, or like
Exactly.
come to the dinner table not 2 hours late because you were like messing around on your phone or your iPad.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
I think there's a lot to be said with just the basic parenting skills that you don't let fall by the wayside just because maybe you're introducing some of these financial parenting skills. I love this. Okay, let's do a quick speed round. What is the most fun, innovative piece of your new products that you've developed that you're excited about?
Oh my God. There are so many things. So we've got some new boxes. One of them is the birthday box, which is truly fun. I say to families, if you do absolutely nothing else, you can do this once a year and it will make a difference. And the birthday box works for children as young as 5 and as old as 15. And the entire purpose of it is to take this kid to dinner, go through the stuff that's in the box. And the idea is to introduce the balance between privilege, which is the birthday party, and responsibility, which is you're another year older. Now what? And having something that is that concrete but fun to use on the night before, not the day of, but the night before the birthday, I think is one of the most fun, wonderful tools that we have come up with. So
I
the
love
birthday
that.
box is good.
I love that. I love that. What's one lesson that a client has taught you?
Oh, well, certainly the empowered parent, the one who I just spoke about, who said, just because we can doesn't mean we should, is the one that really is connecting with that child and making a difference in their family. So I think the importance of being an empowered parent really it comes home to me every day.
What's one piece of advice you'd give to grandparents?
Oh, um, try not to use the word cute too much. And when you think about the gifts you're going to give, make sure they're functional in a way that is going to build agency, not just dependence.
What is one financial value that you hope every child has growing up?
Oh, that you really think about moral compass in connection with your capacity to spend. What are your principles? I mean, fundamentally, your principles is what's going to drive your financial behavior.
Oh, I love that. Jolene Godfrey, legend here on the Tamarind Learning Podcast. So excited to have you. Thank you so, so much. If our listeners, viewers want to learn more about Bounce 10, where do they go?
Ooh, they go to our website, www.bounce-10.com. And I just want to say Bounce is for resilience, 10 is for the 10 money skills.
Thanks for that little clarification too. Well, I would encourage you to, look up Jolene's website, find her books. She's got wonderful books, and reach out. And, there's a whole host of things that you've written. So I'm just thrilled that you could be with us here today at the Tamarind Learning Podcast. If you like this podcast, please like, subscribe, share it with your friends, your peers, and come back and join us again. So great to have you.
Thanks so much, Kirby. It was fun to be here.
If today's conversation with Jolene Godfrey resonated with you, Tamarind Learning offers courses designed to help families build financial capability at every stage of life. Start with personal finance fundamentals to build confidence in budgeting, cash flow, and financial decision-making. Explore stewardship to develop a healthy relationship with wealth, responsibility, and long-term thinking. For families preparing future generations, Beneficiary Fundamentals helps beneficiaries understand trusts, inheritance, and the responsibilities that come with wealth. and Investing Fundamentals introduces the principles of investing, risk, and growing wealth over time. Because financial education matters, but as Jolene reminds us, financial parenting and stewardship matter even more. Please visit tamarindlearning.com/education to learn more about these courses and continue your learning journey.